Okay, so my talk is about thinking together through communities of practice. And I think we already belong to a community. I think you would all agree with me na in one way or another, in one form or another, we belong to a community. Whether it's a community in the department, community in the college, in our church community, and all these things. So we belong to this community. But some of us quite don't know yet that these communities of practice is also a means for us to learn as well. And for the college, it could be a means for us to leverage this community of practice and achieve more of our goals if we know and understand more about it. So the parts of my presentation would include definition of community of practice, the components of practice, learning in COP, factors for the formation and maintenance, its contributions to teacher development, and cultivating communities of practice. For the factors and contributions, this comes from a bit from my dissertation, and then the rest comes from literature because I think that my data would not actually apply to our setting in the College of Education. So what is community of practice? Community of practice is a concept based on the idea that learning is a social process whereby knowledge is co-constructed in a specific context and embedded within a particular social and physical environment. So this communities of practice started from the research of Leave and Wenger when they studied apprenticeship, uh, um, because they noticed that learning could not come from do not really come from like a formal classroom. Learning can also come from being in a community, much like of a journeyman and the master craftsman, for example. So just like that. So in the apprenticeship setup, and they noticed that when we learn, um, that learning in that type of format or in apprenticeship, we the for example the journeyman became like he is in, or a person is in the periphery, but then this person, for example, ako, I'm learning from Mom Ami. So I'm a legitimate person learning, but I'm yet at the periphery. So that's why they call it legitimate peripheral participation. So that's basically COP. And it also started with other persons that would um, that we can attribute communities of practice also from is also Polanyi. Polanyi is a chemist, and he in his laboratory work he noticed that there are aspects in his teaching and in his profession that he cannot teach to his students just by pure instruction. And he mentioned that it is through indwelling that his students can learn from his experiments and his or more about chemistry. So yun na. So that's so therefore there's Polanyi and Leib and Wenger. And so from there, a lot of theory, this communities of practice concept came out. But it's Atian Wenger who basically conceptualize these communities of practice. So communities of practice, according to him, is a group of people who share a concern or passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. So therefore, from that definition, we somehow belong to communities of practice, right? So in the College of Education, I think in our departments, you can say that our departments like DTTE, SME, DPE, and DPRE belong to a community of practice. But he mentioned as well that there are three structural characteristics of community of practice, and this includes the domain, the practice, and the community. So therefore, not all community can be a community of practice. And so it has to have these three. So the domain, so what do they do? What are their common interests? So that's the domain. And then, okay, so the community, we can't say that it's a if it's just a group of people, then it's not a community of practice. So they have to interact regularly. So for example, if your department is not talking as much, then it's not a community of practice, according to Wenger. And also practice, there has to be learning in that department, or if we call it a community of practice. For example, in DTTE, we should be learning something, and we need to do it better from what we used to have, So that's a community of practice. And community of practice has been very useful in not only in education setup, but also in the fields, most specifically in the business sector, in the financial sector, because they businessmen and of huge organizations have understood the value of these communities of practice. Although before it's not really there's no interest yet on communities of practice, but now more and more companies are applying it because it's good for knowledge management. And these communities of practice in many organizations are quite informal. In informal setup, it started with, for example, the study of Brown and Duguid, for example. It's a very highly cited now work. I'll show later. It's about these representatives in the Xerox company. So who met a lot of problems when they are repairing machines. So this group of people, this group of repairmen started to meet every lunch, and then from there they tried to like create a organize their tricks and solutions to their problems that they created. And later on, the management of Xerox started to get interested in these practices. So for later on, as the concept of communities of practice grew, so these communities of practice has been again applied and used, particularly in knowledge management. And now specifically, like the Japanese companies have transform this understanding in quite a different direction. So again, okay, back to practice. So what is practice? Practice is the product of collective learning and shared of histories of learning in a social context. And practice is the focus of communities of practice. So there has to be a practice. So therefore it's again, as mentioned, it's a product of collective learning. Oops. Okay. Okay, I'll not do anything na lang. So it's a product of collective learning. So what you do, what people does, so that's it. So it could be stories, it could be rules, regulations, the manuals, the department exams that you do. So these are practice. So it requires practice requires regular thinking together about real life problems or hot topics to mutually draw on one another's performances in practice as cues for action. So the practice requires constant interaction, and it should not be just any type of interaction. It should be about thinking together, which and by thinking together, this leads to tacit knowledge that is shared indirectly and redeveloped rather than transferred directly in its original form from one person to another. So the proponents of communities of practice are are not favorable actually of knowledge transfer na term. We always have, we do knowledge transfer. We even have a building in IIT, di ba? Knowledge KTTO. So, so knowledge transfer, they quite don't agree with it, because if you're doing transfer of knowledge, then you are separating knowledge from the practice. And in according to the proponents such as Polanyi, Pierco, and the rest, think that knowledge should be should be go together with practice. And again, it should be not transferred, but it should be recreated from one person to another. So that tacit knowledge. So through thinking together, so for example, for us, to thinking together, practitioners negotiate three structural elements of COPs. And these three structural characteristics makes one community different from or are unique from the other. So this includes mutual engagement. So members create an enabling environment for each to be engaged about. So activities that they do together in order to get things done. So so for example, we do like this one, like the BUKA talk, for example. This is one of the activities. And then another is the joint enterprise, the attempt of members to create a context or common goals in response to their current situation. So these are unique set of problems or hot topics that they care about. So it should not be just anything that would come to our mind. So there has to be like a joint agreement and a shared goal among the members on what they really want as a team, as a department, as a community. And then from there as well, there is a shared repertoire, the joint resources for creating meaning. So the concepts and artifacts which they adopt and co-produce. And in communities of practice, when we share something or this shared repertoire, it should not be just I'll show that later. Okay, the next slide. Okay. Oops. Okay, for a while. Okay. Okay, here. So in the shared, we mentioned about shared repertoire. So in the shared repertoire, practice is the product of collective learning and shared histories of learning, as mentioned. So there is that duality of practice in the shared, as mentioned, shared repertoire or the product or the products. And it has to be co-created by everyone. It should not be just like one person do it for everybody. So, and there is this duality of practice. So there is participation and reification. So participation means the members doing the action. So membership and active involvement in the domain. And reification means congealing of aspects of human experience into fixed form. So for example, like a group of friends go to the canteen every lunchtime, and then they started to discuss about their problems, and so they set up a lot of they have stories, they have created languages and things like that. So these are shared histories or shared or stories that they create that they have that has been collected through their own experience. So there is this participation and reification. So you can, if you're a group of, if you were if you are like a member of that community, or if you're one of this group of friends, then you would, you have known the story as well. And if there's something that came out, then you can recall. So therefore, there is participation and reification. So, for example, a constitution of the Philippines or any country, there has to be that too. So, it should not be just a constitution. Everybody has to follow. Everybody has to participate. So, that's the concept. So, if we do create rules, for example, in the department, we create procedures, we create research, then there has to be participation. It has to be used by the community as well. And so this practice or these products of collective learning can be in a form of explicit knowledge and then tacit knowledge. So explicit knowledge is or examples, the language, tools, documents, regulations, and tacit knowledge includes subtle cues, well-tuned sensitivities, shared worldviews, untold rules of thumb. So these are examples of practice. So learning in COP, therefore, is quite different from what we typically know as in a form of cognitive learning. So it's different. So here, every aspect of the practice is a form of learning. So the community is being a member in a community is a form of learning. So it's a learning as belonging. And when you are in a community as well, you develop your own identity. So therefore, it's a learning as becoming. And when you are together in a community, you begin to change practice. You begin to learn again the practice or becoming a practitioner. So therefore, you are learning as doing, and you also created an experience or an evolution of what practice is or the meaning itself. So therefore, learning as experience. So it's quite different. And the implication, therefore, to working, learning, and innovating. So these three, for example, in the College of Education, or in our respective departments, has to go together. So for example, so when we are working, we are learning, and we are innovating at the same time as a community of practice. So there's we consider the conditions aside from the goals. So for example, we should not be just so much focused on like, for example, we have goals in the department or we have IPCR, but we have to consider the conditions for reaching such goals. So it's not about looking at the map, but also considering the conditions of the road. And then the second thing is as in the learning aspect, it's more about becoming a practitioner aside from learning about the practice, learning about like what teaching means. So it should be about being a practitioner, and because we are a community of it's because if we consider ourselves as a COP, then we have to be capable of innovating, and it's inevitable in a COP. So we have to be capable of reconceiving not only the environment, but also our own identity. So for example, now with the advancement of technologies, then recent technologies, education 4.0, industry 4.0, then we have to reconceive as well our identity. So unsa gyud ato ang gusto as a college, as a department sa ingon ana, or whatever community we might conceive of in the future. So in my dissertation, this is from the results from my dissertation. So the factors in community of practice formation and maintenance. So this is also quite consistent with the literature. So factors include leadership. So in leadership, for example, in the principal, okay, so the principal or the department head, so they are very important in communities of practice because they set the goals, they monitor the progress of the members, and they are organized. So, and members prefer them to be organized and not limit the potential of the members. So because there's this there are cases wherein their leaders would just go with the flow. So therefore, the members would just follow. Okay, kay inaanay naman ako ang leader, so musunod raw mi niya. So inana ang that's one factor in the formation and maintenance. And then the shared goal. Shared goal is very important so that the members would know which direction they are to go through. And basically, for us in the education sector, in the academy, it's more about improvement of student learning and the goal of the university, for example. So one example, one case I'd like to mention is like in one case wherein the students national achievement test is very low. So their goal really is to increase the national achievement test score. So they quite focused into it that the rest of the they prioritize this, that the rest of like minor na mga goals, minor na objectives, they don't quite focus on that because they just wanted to increase the national achievement test score. So therefore, they achieved it in the following year, which is quite good because the members, the teachers understood of this goal, the value of this goal. So therefore, value and the shared goal is very important in a community of practice. Then the next is the sense of membership. So it's about having open communication and having a good working relationship, which the literature would tell us is a trusting relationship, sense of membership, and then the opportunities for interaction, which is very important because without interaction, then we cannot think together, and communities of practice are based on thinking together. So we have to make sure that the schedules, the workload are good enough for us to interact regularly. And then the maintenance activities includes active participation in COP activities. And this active participation is dependent as well on the opportunities for the interaction. Then the programming of schedules by department heads, and the forming of committees for complex tasks. So if it's very complex, then we need to have like mga subgroups and proposing of activities because these are important, which I will discuss later on. And so the least prioritized activity, which I think is also applicable here in the college, is the utilization of data for reviewing and planning instruction as a group. So despite that, for example, in the DepEd, they have this memorandum that they should use data for instruction, but then they did not. So data is very important in a number of literature. Utilization of data is included in the formation and maintenance of communities of practice. And other notable results that I had is that the lack of fellowship made attendance and participation to meetings a form of compliance than a willful act born out of mutual respect among members to the leaders of the community of practice. So we need to have fellowship, Mama May. Okay, and then the contributions to teacher development. First is again this also comes from my research. So and this is based on Bell and Gilbert theory. first is about social development. Teachers became more comfortable working together and develop respect and sensitivity towards one another. So if we meet together, if we work together, then we became comfortable, and we tend to understand each other, and sensitivity and this form of like sensitivity and friendliness and collegiality it is a tacit knowledge. And then personal development, COP enabled the teachers to gain control and confidence in teaching, became more flexible and motivated to work despite the stress. So they still know how to manage their stress. And then professional development, the teachers became innovative, because if you work together, you see your peers are improving and having a better position, better job. So you tend to also like parang musunod, di ba? You tend to follow if you are in a community of practice. So, and they also become reflective of their practice. Now, that they teachers would then reflect on how to improve themselves from seeing their peers. So this also quite applies to the collective teacher efficacy of Bandura, and also increased teaching standards, because again, there are models, you have role models, so then you become also motivated to work and to improve your own practice. Um, and this one, it comes from the book by Wenger, Snyder, and McDermott. I did not present my how to cultivate COP from the result of my work, as this it would not I think it would not apply to in tertiary education. So first is on designing for evolution. Refers to building upon pre-existing networks and shepherding them. So here, I'll just show one example. So for example, in College of Education, we understand that people will go, and people will come and go. We don't live forever, so we have to design for evolution. So because there will become new dean, new department heads, so things like that. So we have to think of the future, and how can our networks be built upon that. And then second is opening dialogue between inside and outside perspectives to see opportunities and possibilities. So we need, as I think we have done this already, to also partner with from the outside and from insider and the outsider as well, to see opportunities and possibilities. Even in the DepEd, they had this. They created there are schools who created conferences in their own school and invite the community. And then third is inviting different levels of participation and not expecting everyone to participate at the same level, because in communities of practice, it's voluntary. So we cannot expect everyone to agree with us. So, and also it also means that there are tasks that only few people are necessary. So it doesn't mean that if you hold a webinar, then you have to include everyone in the College of Education, diba? So things like that. So different levels of participation, and also and then properly like for example, schedule the people who will be included or participate, or the members who will organize these events, for example. So example, kanisha, this will be the group, only these 5 people or 5 faculty will join, then the next kanina pud sila, or things like that. And then another is developing both public and private space, because this will foster individual relationship or informal networks, as well as public activities or events, as these two events support in the development of the other. So for example, we hold we create a research conference. So in doing this conference, we are able to improve oneself, but that to improve kaning our relationship as a community, but we are also sharing our knowledge to others as well. So and and by doing this, this one of these example is a case in Cebu, is one school in Cebu. So they tend to have like a they call it more it's more of like a sort of science fair where they invite the community members, and from there they learn to improve themselves as teachers, as a group of faculty in their department, as a group of like a school, or as a school organization, because they tend to have this annually. So ingon ana. And then another is focus on value. So members recognizing the significance of their action. So people or members in the community has to understand why they're doing such things, and there has to be a focus on addressing so at the start it may just be about needs and problems of the community, and then later on about expanding communities and sustaining gains. So, so it has to start at first with the value and the goal has to be understood by everyone. And then another is combining familiarity and excitement. So this is also related to the previous mentioned na in the inside and outside combined. So it is needed for a well-connected community. Or di ko boring. And then the seventh one, which is very important, is about creating a rhythm for the community. This refers to finding the right pacing and the book of activities for the community to thrive and remain vibrant. Because interactions in the community is needed for mutual engagement, and mutual engagement is needed for thinking together to develop practice. So if people are busy and having a heavy workload, then they could not work well, they could not think well, and innovation will be affected. So creating a rhythm na sakto lang for the community is necessary to cultivate communities of practice. And it has to be it should be noted as well that most communities of practice is not about setting up, it's about cultivation. And because in a community of practice, there is that a tendency to self-organize, or this group of people tend to self-organize, and these communities of practice we have to use them to leverage to use it to our advantage in the College of Education. So we have to, for example, support these communities that we may be coming up in the future, or cultivate those that are existing. So that's all for my presentation, and thank you very much.